Hello, and welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thank you all for tuning in to my channel and joining me as I explore the wide world of pens. Today's a special day. It's a special video. And yes, it is a kind of generic brown box with a nice red ribbon around it, held in place with some double stick tape. But if you open it up, you'll see a nice rickshaw bag. And one might recognize the design on that bag. But let's look at the pen. And we'll see the Moonwalk pen. Characteristic of that first step of man on the moon. It really has a great feel to it. A nice engraving there, very well done. So unlike just reviewing this pen, we're going to actually have a conversation with John Hubbard, the creator and maker of the Moonwalk pen. I think you'll find it very interesting. I certainly did. If we uncap the pen, we'll see that we just pull the cap off, and it comes off fairly easily. We'll see a nice Franklin Christoph number 6 nib, black nib. So it's a Yovo nib. We should all be happy about that. If we unscrew the section, we'll see a classic converter. So this is a 3D printed pen. And unless someone told me it was a 3D printed pen, I wouldn't have guessed it. I've had other 3D printed items, and they're nowhere near the quality of this pen. It's fairly light, but it certainly fits well in the hand, and that section is really nice, and you can hold it anywhere around there. This is not a pen to post, but you can post it if you want. It's just that, I don't know. It doesn't change the balance at all. In fact, it's kind of nicer than I thought. So I kind of like the pen. We're going to explore it in a little more detail and then have a great conversation with John. Comes with this nice little note. Yeah, I like the handwriting. We take out the note and we'll see a little introduction, a thank you, which is always great, and just a little bit of advice on the pen and how to use it and everything else. And it's signed by John Hubbard. His company is Artcraft. Here's one of the cards that you'll get in the package, and here's another one. So that's the pen and everything else. Also in the package was 2 cartridges, but you know me, cartridges do not excite me. So now I think we need to talk to John and hear how he came to create this Moonwalk pen and be able to share it with us in the pen community. Here we go. Very honored today to have an opportunity to talk with John Hubbard, creator of the Moonwalk pen. So we're going to ask John a little bit about his background and how he came about to create this amazing pen. Over to you, John.
Hi, Chris. How are you this afternoon? Good to see you.
Thank you. I'm doing fine.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me, how did you get into this? Well, to start with, I'm an engineer, and my first job as a real engineer was helping to design the control system for the Saturn V moon rocket. So for my first 7 years as an engineer, we launched Apollo missions and and we launched Skylab, and we dealt with all those kinds of issues. And I've been a space nut ever since. I live in Huntsville, Alabama. Rockets are built here, and that's just kind of what we do. And so even though I wasn't in the space business any longer, I still was interested in it. I'll put it that way. The other piece of it is about I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, my parents had died, and I remembered my mother writing with a fountain pen. And I asked my sister if we could find that fountain pen, and she came up with it. And so then I had to figure out how to make it work again. It turned out it was a 1951 Schaefer thin model that just preceded the snorkel. Nice little pen, got it working, and by then I was hooked. Because as an engineer, I was interested in the insides of the pen as well as the outsides. So when you learn to replace ink sacs and such as that, it's just fun. I've collected pens over the years. I've got more pens than my wife knows because they hide fairly easily. I've done Schaefer's and Conklin, the old crescent filler Conklins and such as that. So I've always been interested in the different designs. Well,
that's excellent, and that's something I think many people watching this also share.
And we back a few years ago, I realized that the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landings was coming up, and I thought, well, gee, I'd like to do something to commemorate that. I was involved in it. Seems like a good idea. How about a pen? And of course, one of the things that everybody remembers is the famous photograph of the Apollo footprint on the moon. So I thought, well, how could I incorporate the Apollo footprint into a fountain pen? At that point, I had an idea in mind for what the pen ought to look like, had no idea how I might make it. You couldn't turn it on a lathe, and I didn't want to just put a decal on the outside of a smooth pen, with a photograph of the footprint. I wanted it to feel like it was the real footprint on the moon. I was at a meeting.
Having had a pen in my hand, you've accomplished that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have mine in my hand, and my thumb's just running right over that footprint right now. So it's really kind of fun. I was at a meeting one day, and I got into a conversation about this, and a young man leaned over my shoulder and said, "Why don't you try 3D printing?" I thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. So that required figuring out how to get this look into a model that could be printed. Turns out that's pretty complicated in itself. For one thing, if you take just a normal fountain pen, let's say this Schaefer here, okay? Nice, smooth, mechanical design, cylinders and cones and all that sort of thing. This is relatively easy to model in a computer, but footprints are not. So I found a young man here in town who was really good at 3D modeling, and he modeled the basic fountain pen for me. Then I investigated, well, how do you get craters and footprints and such on here? And I found out, believe it or not, his sister knew how.
Great.
A tool called ZBrush, which is basically a digital sculpturing tool. It's what they use to do animations and make these creatures and all that sort of thing that aren't, normal mechanical models. And so his sister, Keely, took the basic fountain pen design. I keep on forgetting to hold it up for the camera. The basic design, and added the texture of the lunar surface on there, this sort of sandy texture. And then we took the photograph of the footprint. She made that into sort of a three-dimensional stamp, if you will, and squished that into the model. And then it looked kind of bare up here on the cap. So I said, Keely, make us some craters. Sent her some pictures of craters, and she did that. And all of this, it was interesting because I never met Keely while we were doing this. We did all this on the internet. Nothing physical goes back and forth. We just passed it back and forth. Eventually, we wound up with the model. Now, how do you print it? And if you think about 3D printers, there are a lot of different kinds. And the kind that most people see that has the little spool of monofilament line and heats it and melts it simply can't do the kind of resolution that's required for this picture. It just comes out too grainy, if you will, if you do use picture talk. So I found a person who had what was called a stereolithography printer that uses a laser to harden liquid acrylic and can print to a resolution of 25 microns. That's 25 ten-thousandths of an inch.
That's
And so
amazing. That's a very fine resolution for those that may not be able to calculate that.
it is. And if you want a really smooth surface, for example, you really need that kind of resolution. I'll tell you the truth. We now print this pen at 50 microns because we don't need the 25 microns, and that cuts the printing time in half. A pen like this takes about 6 hours to print. You print it standing on end, and this particular printer can print about 5 sets of barrels and caps at one time. So you could print 5 pens in about 6 hours. That's
Wow.
what it comes down to. And then when you get that done, can we get this where we can see it? Okay, you see this one in my here. Notice the color, it's kind of gray. And the Moonwalk pen is kind of gray too, but it's a nicer gray. And it has some shades of blue and purple and so on that are actually found on the moon. This is what comes out of the printer, is this gray thing. So at that point, I went to a young man here in town whose business is printing models for people. I'm sorry, painting models for people. And he worked up a paint scheme and he paints these pens for me. So they're hand painted. Okay, each one's hand painted with an airbrush.
Yep.
And at that point, you've got paint that's rather fragile on the thing. So what do you do at that point? So then I went and found out about coatings. And what we finally wound up with is a ceramic coating. This is a clear matte ceramic coating made by a company called Cerakote. And I happened to find that there was a man here in town who is a factory certified applicator of Cerakote. So I take the hand-painted pens, take them to Robert, and he sprays them with this, about a 5 micron thickness ceramic coating over the acrylic. It hardens in about a week, and then you have this pen. At that point,
I think that's unbelievable, because I don't think I had any clue about the amount of people engaged and all the different artistic talents and all the different materials that end up becoming this amazing Moonwalk pen. And I think it's good that our viewers are going to be able to at least appreciate and understand that this just doesn't miraculously come to be. A lot of people are engaged and a lot of creative people are engaged to eventually come up with this product. And I never would have guessed that you did a ceramic coating as the last process. That would have not been on my list.
We tried some other coatings. You Google how to protect a hand-painted pen on the internet, and there's no answers out. Google doesn't come back with any answers. So it just required a lot of hunting. It took about 2 years from the time I decided to do it until I actually had a pen I thought somebody might actually use.
And I also think that it's also a very creative process. I mean, you came up first with a great idea, and then you brought that idea and brought it to life, which I think is just amazing. I have a lot of even more admiration and respect for what you've done than I did from just looking at the pen and getting some initial information from you about how it was made. Mm-hmm. So I think as a final closing, a lot of people might ask, John, what's next?
Okay. Well, one thing that's next is a pen that's pretty similar to this and came out of the same sort of idea. I call it the Mars Rover. You didn't know I had this here, and this one is a prototype. This is printed in a white acrylic. It just happened to be white that we had on the machine that day. And you can't tell it, but it has the tracks of a rover running up the barrel and around the cap and out this way. Whoa, let me hold it here. Up the barrel and around the cap here. And then the texture of the thing is sandy and stone and rocky, like the pictures we've seen from the rovers on Mars. And it'll be hand painted as well in that sort of reddish tan Mars color with some black detailing, just the colors we've seen from Mars. And this is one. No, there's no nib here, but you can see. And in fact, you may like this, Chris. This cap screws on.
Aha!
1.5 turns.
Perfect.
And parts line up.
Yeah.
That was a trick.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I mean, I think that's great. And you know what comes after Mars, right?
Yeah, Jupiter.
I know. You've got to work your way out to the solar system. And when you finally get to it, I still believe Pluto's a planet. I'm just one of those, emotional guys that really can't give up on Pluto as a planet. But I'm certain that will also be an interesting a 3D printing adventure trying to replicate whatever it is that exists out there. So, John, I really appreciate your time. And I certainly do appreciate and love and enjoy your creation, your first creation of the Moonwalk pen. And I'll encourage you to continue on with this endeavor. And Mars is certainly one that would be quite interesting. So any last words for our audience before we say goodbye?
No, I'd like to thank the 83 people that have bought a Moonwalk pen. That's been fun. And they range from Australia to Austria, and almost all just sold online from my website. And by the way, I do have, for those people that just can't use a fountain pen, I've got a rollerball version. It's the same pen, a capped rollerball. All you got to do is swap out the gripping section, and it's ready to go.
I think that's that. We need to be able to support anybody who likes to write, doodle, draw, sketch, whatever they like to do. They'll use a writing instrument, and hopefully it's a Moonwalk designed writing instrument.
Thank you, Chris.
Again, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasurable experience, and I certainly learned a lot, and hopefully everybody watching has learned a lot. Hopefully we'll get that number of Moonwalk pens out there around the world. We'll increase that number for you. So have a great day, and thank you very much for your contribution to the pen community.
Thank you, Chris. It's been my pleasure.
I certainly hope that all of you enjoyed hearing from John Hubbard. It's not typical to be able to hear a creator of a unique pen like this talk about the process. I certainly learned a lot, was very impressed, and really had no idea about the amount of work required to bring a pen like this from idea into a functional writing instrument. So one of the things that we talked about was the tactile sensation of this pen. Now that I know there's that ceramic coating over hand painting that gives it that unique look, I just am even happier to have this pen in my possession and be able to use it and experience it and think about the history behind the ideas of this pen, in addition to the reason this pen has came into existence. So we're going to give you some dimensions so you can put these in perspective and appreciate the pen from many different levels. Then we're going to do a live writing sample with that Trommel number 8 ink. So the thing to keep in mind is this is a Franklin Christoph branded nib, but they start with Yovo nibs. This nib required just a little bit of work. When I first filled it up, it wouldn't write, but after I let the ink settle down and do everything it needed to do, now it's been writing consistently. The nib doesn't dry out. After a couple days, I'm able to just pop the cap and write with it, which is also a good sign of a pen. Certainly not a pen I would use every day. Certainly not a pen I would carry with me, but with that rickshaw sleeve, you could carry it around safely. So let's see that nib in action. For those of you that follow my channel, you should know I'm not shy about putting a new ink into a new pen. I've enjoyed these Trommel inks. I got 12 of them. Yes, there's some glitter in them. There's a gold glitter. And it's kind of a gray base. As you can see, some of it leaked into this bottle. Don't know why. Sorry, here we are with the number 8. It's on the gray side with some glitter in it. And we'll see in my writing sample here. It works well in that broad Jowo, well, Franklin Christoph nib. The schmear is interesting. It's like the number 5 schmear, but certainly doesn't have the saturation of these other 4 inks, but it has some decent shading, and it definitely has some glitter. Works well in the Moonwalk pen. So some viewers talk about their hesitancy in using any type of glitter ink. You can see it does sometimes coat the feed, but I just find it to work well, and I just really appreciate that extra dimension that glitter adds to the ink on paper. So I'm ready to put up a little bit more extra cleaning, but I haven't had that much trouble at all, and I've had a pen with glitter ink in it for over a year, same ink, never cleaned it, and it always wrote first time whenever I uncapped it. So some people may have trouble with it, but then you can have trouble with any ink in some pens, and some pens can take any ink. So such is our fountain pen experiences. Best to just enjoy them for what they are. I think you can hear how smooth this nib is, but it's what I would expect with a broad Jowo nib or Bach. There's a little feedback, but this paper tends to provide feedback, this Fabriano paper, Equicro. So how do we rate this pen? I'm going to give it a 10.0 plus. It gets a whole bunch of checks for being very unique. Just an amazing piece of history put into a fountain pen. Using this broad nib is excellent. Ergonomics is good. What more can I say? And this Trommel ink has certainly given me a lot more shading than I originally thought. We've come to the conclusion of this video. It's run a little bit long because of that interview, but I was mesmerized by listening to John talk about how he brought this pen from concept to reality and started selling it. Great. Thank all of you for watching. Hope this video finds all of you safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying your pens, finding something new and unique to spur those creative juices and putting some ink on paper, because that's what they're made for. We've reached the end of this video, and we're going to say bye. Nope. Yeah, I ran out of ink in there for a minute. You can push it, because this is a very wet writer. Later. So I was not happy that the pen got ink starved. It appears as that this ink gets hung up into the cartridge, so when I wrote all the ink out of the feed, there wasn't any more feed coming through the cartridge. But now I've reprimed it and we're back and running. I just have to keep an eye on it. I do like the way it works in this pen, but we have to be aware that fountain pens are a unique animal, and each pen and ink combo is going to have its certain challenges to it, but that's the fun. It's not consistent. It's not a click and write. So enjoy your pens and enjoy all the little nuances they have.